Hi everyone, I hope that you're all doing well and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Shannon and I'm a professional pet portrait and wildlife artist, and I usually draw in coloured pencils, but for this particular tutorial I'm going to be teaching you how to draw this duckling in graphite. So when I first started out, I didn't start out in coloured pencils, I started with graphite, and it's a really good way to get into drawing if you're a beginner and you've never drawn before, because it helps you to get all the sort of techniques and the shapes and proportions and all that kind of stuff right before you move on to coloured pencils. It's also a really fun medium if you've already drawn in coloured pencils before and you just want to like switch it up a little bit. So I just thought for a change it would be nice to do a graphite tutorial, and with it being the time of year where we see lots of ducklings, I thought a duckling tutorial would be really cute. So just to give you a little bit of information on the supplies that I'm using, this is a 6x6 inch piece of Fabriano Artistico hot press watercolour paper in the 640 GSM, and it is in the white colour. You can get this paper in a lighter weight 300 GSM, it's a little bit thinner and it's a little bit cheaper as well, and that'll work just as well if you're interested in that, but other than that just use whatever paper you've got. This is just my favourite one. And I will be using these pencils for this tutorial. They weren't overly expensive, they were quite cheap to be honest. They are this, I can never say this word, Staedtler 6 Mars Lumograph pencils, and you get HB, 2B, 4B, 6B, 7B and 8B. So yeah, any graphite pencils that you can get hold of that have like a different variety in there will do the job for this tutorial. So everything you need to know is listed down below, and I will now zoom you into the head where we'll make a start on this drawing. Okay, so just before we start, I wanted to say that the techniques I'll be using in this video are just techniques that I like to use. There's probably loads of different ways to draw this duckling, and I am not like professionally trained in drawing. This is just what I've picked up along the way and the way that I like to draw. So take from it what you want, and obviously if you find different ways that you prefer drawing, go with it. Just art is subjective and there are different ways that you can do things is basically all that I'm saying. So yeah, I'm gonna start out with the HB pencil from the set that I've got, and I tend to use this the most as kind of like the base layer. So if you've seen any of my coloured pencil tutorials, you know that I put down like a really creamy thick base layer, but with graphite I prefer to press on a lot lighter and sort of just really lightly build up the layers instead. So I'm going to start on this eye. Make sure your pencil's really sharp. I'll link the pencil sharpener that I use, and I'm just going to go around it and sort of just define the edge a little bit more. Not pressing on very hard, just enough to get like a decent amount of definition. I feel like I'm struggling to talk well in this video because I've got a big ulcer and it's just, it's hurting when I talk, so if I sound a bit weird, that's probably why. And then I'm just going to lightly go in and colour over the eye just to create a bit of a smooth layer. I like to build up the layers quite lightly and slowly because I just find it, you make the least amount of mistakes and it's just a better way to build up all of the different shadows and stuff. So that's why I always start out with like a really light layer of the HB. It just goes on nice and smoothly. So I'm just making sure that I avoid those highlights, because you'll never get the paper as white as you will if you just leave it. And you want to make sure those eyes look really lifelike and that they look quite glossy, and leaving that highlight is the best way to do that. Now I'm just going to start mapping in a little bit of those like fluffy feathers around the eye. So I'm just going to start doing some teeny tiny little strokes. Sort of make sure you're looking at the picture and you're following the direction of these little tiny pieces of like fluffy feathers. I've done this tutorial quite small because I just wanted it to be like something that you could do quite quickly, and it's not going to take you absolutely ages, and you can still learn the same techniques. And I like working small scale, so a lot of my other graphite pieces are this size. Just going around that eye. As you can tell, I'm just pressing on really lightly, like my pencil's only just touching the paper. There we go. Right, that'll do for now. And now I'm going to use the 4B. I don't really use a 2B that much. I just feel like it doesn't really do that much. So I'm going to use the 4B really sharp, and I'm just going to go over that eye, going around it. And just redefining it, making it a bit darker. I do press on a little bit harder now. Not too hard, but just enough that it starts to like create a bit more depth. So as you can see, it's starting to look a little bit more lifelike. And there is actually like a little sort of line on the bottom of the eye where it's a bit lighter, kind of like where the bottom eyelid is. And I'm going to use my little Tombow eraser to get that out. So I just like to clean off any of the dirt on it so that it's nice and clean, and it helps take the pencil off a little bit better. This is probably like one of my most used tools. It's just really handy to have for drawing because it's so tiny. It's the Tombow Mono 0 eraser, and I'm just going to go in and really lightly just take a little bit of that pencil off at the bottom of the eye. See how you've just got the tiniest sort of light bit at the bottom. I find that this eraser works better with graphite than it does coloured pencils. Takes it off a bit easier. And then going back to that 4B, I'm just going to tidy it up a little bit. So just going to go around the bottom, and then around the top of that lighter bit, just to tidy it up and define it a little bit more. Okay, now I'm going to go back to that HB, and I'm going to carry on sort of building up that feather texture, just doing teeny tiny little strokes really lightly. And I like to sort of go in and map in the darkest areas first, just to act as like a little guideline of where everything needs to go. So I'm sort of bringing it across this like darker bit here, and I'm just gonna gradually build it up. And like I said before, just make sure you're watching like the direction that these little feathers are going in. That's like the most important thing when it comes to drawing animals. Always have your eye on the picture to see which direction all these little strands of feathers are going. I'm also not doing them like perfectly straight. I sort of alternate between doing them in different directions, like my little strokes, just so it looks more natural. Don't be afraid to like cross the strokes over, overlap them a little bit. But yeah, by building up the layers really slowly and lightly, you're less likely to make a mistake and have to like correct it, so it's just a much tidier way of doing it for me, and that makes me really like satisfied and happy. I'm not one of those people that can go in and like do like the whole thing really roughly and then do it like the next layer and then just keep building it up like that. I kind of just do it section by section, make sure that I've got each bit right and I've built up the layers properly before I move on. That's just me. I know not everyone likes to work like that though. So here, sort of like direction of the feathers sort of come round like this, so I'm going to make sure that my drawing follows that direction. If you zoom in on the picture, if you've got it up on like an iPad or something like I have, just zoom in and have a real close-up look at which direction you can see it going in. And I'm gonna bring it up here a bit. Sort of doing slightly longer strokes as you get further up. And I'll show you the sort of technique that I like to use for the longer strokes. So I call them like little pointy V shapes, kind of like this. So those longer strokes look a bit more clumpy. So I kind of just like do this sort of technique rather than drawing like straight little lines. It just looks a bit more natural to alternate. Right, before we go any further, I want to go back in with the 4B and start adding this darker little bit of fuzz, fluff. I keep wanting to call it fur, but it's not fur, is it? It's feathers. So I'm just going to go in and darken up this bit here. I'm not pressing too hard. Just want to like really softly and gradually darken it up. And then bringing some down here. Just doing the teeny tiniest little strokes ever, like just like touching the paper with it. And I'm just going to go around the bottom of that eye a little bit. Just sort of like coming out the bottom. Just to darken it up a tad. And then there's like another like darker bit that goes just around there. So I'm going to start on that bit. The shorter the little strokes that you do, the more fuzzy it's going to look, so make sure you're not doing like massive long strokes. You can do that when we get up here though. See how it's starting to just look dead fluffy? You can just keep like going over and over the same bit until it's soft enough. And then where this beak is here, I'm just going to use that 4B, and I'm just going to define the edge of the beak like that, and a little bit here. And I'm just going to blend a few little strokes from that line that we've just made back into the fluffy bit, just to like add a bit of a shadow into that edge. And I'm going to add a little bit more of this around here. Okay, and then back to the HB. I'm going to carry on bringing it up here really lightly. Slightly longer strokes in my little sort of like alternating directions, little V shapes that I showed you before on this card, my little V shapes. Just helps the fur to look a bit more like clumpy. Sorry, I keep calling it fur, it's not fur. Feathers. And I'm just going to dab away these little outlines with my putty eraser. If you don't have one of these, I really recommend getting one. You can just mould it into whatever shape, and you can just dab the pencil marks and you never get any like little bits coming off like you do with a normal eraser. So back to the HB, I'm actually just going to do some little bits coming off the side there, sort of like alternating the length so that it looks really natural and soft. Sort of like bringing the lines to meet in a bit of a point. Like that, and then just going to carry on bringing some little strokes up over the head. Really softly, really light touch. I'll bring a few up here. And then just going to carry on bringing it up the top of the head, just getting rid of that outline first. The great thing with graphite is it is a lot quicker to draw with than coloured pencils, and it's also cheaper. You don't have to think about the colours that you're using. You just need a small set of like, I'd say HB, 4B, 6B and 8B are my most used pencils. I don't even use like the 7B or the 2B from this set. And I don't really use any like blending stumps or anything like that. I just like the look of it when it's just the pencil, but that's just personal preference. If you struggle sort of blending it just by drawing it, then it might be worth having a look into blending stumps and stuff, but I don't really like the smudged look myself, personally. That's just personal preference, like I said. I'm just going to use the eraser just to soften the edge a little tiny bit, like that. Then back to that 4B, just going to go in and start darkening up these little strokes, create a bit more texture and definition. So they're slightly shorter around the eye itself, and then they get a little bit longer as we go up here. So So I'm doing my little sort of pointy V shapes, just gradually building up this darker bit here. But yeah, I used to only draw in graphite when I first started doing pet portraits and actually like selling them and doing commissions and stuff. And that kept me going for years, to be honest, before I even tried coloured pencils. So if you're brand new to drawing and you would like to get into coloured pencils eventually, but you just don't feel confident enough yet, build up your confidence with graphite. It's a good place to start. Just blending it down a bit. And I'm going to bring it up to the top of the head. And I might just use the eraser just to lighten up this bit here on the right hand side and literally just dabbing it softly. And a little bit here. The eraser is your best friend on graphite drawings because it just helps to easily create those highlights and take any away where it's too dark. I might just use the HB to add a little bit more definition to that right hand edge. And I'm going to add a little bit more to the top. And then I'm going to start bringing more little strokes down here. Doing some teeny tiny little hairs coming off to make it look really soft and fluffy. I tend to like jump around a lot when I'm drawing, like I won't just do one little bit for too long. It just keeps me like interested in it. I'm just gonna get rid of these lines. And carry on bringing that pencil down. And then I'm just going to add a bit of definition to this bottom bit of the beak. I'm just using the HB. There we go. It just helps me to see where that is. And I'm going to carry on, just bringing that down even more. then there's like a little darker bit here. Just going to map that in. Carry on, just bringing that down. Right, I'm just going to darken up around the eyes now. And I'm going to use the 6B. I'm just going to start adding more definition, create a bit more of a contrast. Starting on like this little bit here, going around the eye. And then it's a bit darker coming up this bit here. I might just use the 4B to blend that in a little bit better. Just sort of like go between the different pencils to like make sure it's all nicely blended and soft. Bring a little bit more around here. And I am actually going to darken up the eye with the 6B, making sure to just go around that lighter bit. Just going in, darkening it up a little bit. And add a little bit more here. Then back to this bit, going to darken this up a tad. And I'm going to add a little bit more definition through this top bit with that 6B. Just doing my little sort of V shapes. And I'm just going to use that 4B to kind of like blend it in a little bit more, bringing it down a tad. Just going to add a little bit more to this sort of like outside edge of the head. And a little bit more around here. Just going to add a bit more of the 4B around here. And definitely I need some more around this bit. bit more around here. Just going to darken up this bit here with the 4B. Then I'm going to go back in with the HB and just carry on bringing it down. So just making it a bit darker along this line where the neck starts. Just going to add a few more sort of little fluffy bits with that HB. Bring this bit together a tad more. And I'm just going to add some little bits around here. And then just bring this bit together. And then back to the 4B. I'm going to start darkening it up around here. And then there's like a little bit that comes up here that's a bit darker, so I'm just going to bring that down there. And then just going to darken this like whole area up. I think ducklings are like the cutest animal ever. They're just so cute. I think it's because of how fuzzy they are. Like any sort of like chick is just adorable. And just bringing that down there. And then I definitely need to darken this bit up with the 6B. Bring that down there a little bit. And I'm going to add a little bit to the bottom where it meets that neck. And I'm going to darken this bit up even more. Just pressing a little bit harder just to get a bit more depth. And I want to go around this little bit here again. and I'm going to add some little darker bits here for some more contrast. And I'm just going to go back to the 4B and just add a little bit more around here. And a little bit more around here. A little bit more through here. As you can see, it takes me a while to build all the layers up. And then with the HB, I just want to correct the shape of this bit here, so the light comes down a little bit more. Right, before I go any further, I want to do this beak. I just feel like it needs to be done or it looks a little bit weird. So I'm going to start out by adding this end bit here with the HB. So just going to define that a little bit more, not pressing on hard. Sort the shape out. And then I'm going to shade in this bottom part of the beak really lightly with the HB. And then there's like a little line there. I'm just going to add in. And then I'm just going to darken up this bit here where the little like nostril bit is. Just go over that again. And I'm going to use the 4B to darken that up. And I'd say it needs to be even darker, so I'm going to use the 6B, and then there's the tiniest bit of a line at the bottom where it's lighter, so I'm just going to leave a little bit of a gap, but then go around the bottom. Hope you can see that. Just the tiniest little bit lighter. If you can't get that detail in, don't worry, just colour the whole thing in. Or even go back in with the Tombow eraser and just lift a tiny bit of colour out. Well, I say colour, a bit of pencil. As you can tell, I'm used to doing coloured pencil tutorials. Right, and I'm just going to use a HB, add a little bit of shading to the end of the beak. Gonna get that little bit out and bring it up here a little bit. There's some like little weird bits of texture on the beak here, so I'm just gonna try and get that in. And then there's a bit of a line that sort of comes down underneath that nostril. And then it's a bit darker there. And then I'm going to add a little bit of shading around here. And then a little bit around here. going to use a 6B just to tidy up the shape of the bottom bit a little bit more. And I'm going to add that line there, a little bit darker. Don't worry if like it doesn't look exactly the same as the picture, as long as it looks like a duck. That's all that matters. And then there's like a little bit of a line here that I'm adding in with the HB. Just gonna add a little bit through that beak. A little bit at the end. Then using the 4B, I'm just gonna darken up some of these darker areas. It's just about getting as much detail in as you can. You don't need to get every single little bit of detail in there. And if your duck doesn't look exactly like the duck in the picture, but it still looks like a duck, then you've done a good job. And just going to darken that line up. Darken that bit up a tad, and around here. And I might just add a little bit more HB just through there, just really softly, to add a bit of shading, and a little bit more on the end. There we go. And then I'm just going to finish off with this, and then I'm just going to do a little bit more with the HB down here. Get rid of any of the pencil lines if need be. I feel like I want to create a little bit more contrast, so I'm just going to use the eraser again and just like dab on this left hand side where it's a bit lighter to make those lighter areas pop a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more on this right side as well. And then I'm going to add a little bit more definition back in with the HB. Just do a few hairs coming off the edge. Then I'm going to use the 8B, and I'm just going to darken up some of these dark areas even more. Darken up this bit. here. Darken up that eye a tad. And I'm going to use the 4B just to blend it all together a tad better. Right around here. It's looking a little bit weird. I just need to tidy that up. And get down a bit more. A little bit more around here. Here. And darken it up down here a little bit more. And I'm just gonna use the eraser just to dab that a little bit. And then using the HB, I'm going to blend a few more bits through with that. And I'm just going to lift off a little bit more with the eraser, just slightly dabbing it just to like smooth it all out. Blend it together a bit, and I'm going to do a little bit. This little bit here. And then using the HB, just going to start bringing it down a little bit around here. And using the 4B, just going to darken it up a little bit around here. And then there's like a little darker bit there. I'm just going to add a little line across. And just want to define that bit a little bit more. Just gonna use the HB again. Just gonna keep like gradually bringing it down, following the direction. Bit more around here. Darkening it up a bit around there. A little bit more. To the edge. few bits through there. I'm just going to darken that bit up ever so slightly. Okay, and I think I will leave it there for part one. And I just want to tidy up this little bit here. Blend it out a bit better. I'm actually just going to use the HB just over those highlights, just to tone them down a little bit, but they're looking a bit too bright. That's a bit better. And I'm just gonna add a little bit more definition. Just pressing on a little bit more with that HB. Adding a little bit more definition through there. Around here. Just blending that a little bit better. A little bit more at the bottom. And a little bit more at the top. And a little bit more around here. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for that part, and then we'll continue down the body in the next video. So I hope you have enjoyed this so far. Make sure to give it a like if you did, it really helps me out, and subscribe to see the next part, and I shall see you very soon. Bye for now.